then we'll promote them real quick. So 7 o'clock, noticed meeting of the advisory committee is open. We'll call the roll. Gina Stino,
Present.
Mike Barclay,
Present.
Fran Collins,
Present.
Patrick Kennedy advised that he'd likely be late. Mark Maggi,
Present.
Ellen Mar,
Present.
Mary McGoldrick,
Present.
Meg Wheeler advised she is not going to be able to make it. And Rob Hillman is present. We are open. The first item on the agenda is zoning bylaw amendments. We are lucky to have Tom, and extraordinarily lucky to have town council, Judge Cutler. So I'll ask that they be promoted. We'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do this, and we'll jump right in. Lauren.
Good evening, everyone. I'm also making a guest appearance as interim planner.
So nice
Happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. Mary,
Did
you need,
uh,
Mary, you thought our meetings were exciting. You need to get out more. No,
Let's remember
that
I was
is
on the
probably
school
true.
committee, Tom.
Would you can you do the honors and introduce our town council?
Sure. I'm Tom Callahan, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Committee and Chair of the Planning Board. And we're going to present on the articles tonight. And with me is Judge Judith Cutler from KP Law. She's former Chief Justice of the Land Court and has been the invaluable resource in helping us rewrite these articles as that we're presenting for the Springtown meeting and then for the fall. Lauren is with us tonight too, because she's going to be doing our screen sharing for us.
We're experts in doing that.
Well, she knows how to do a split screen, which is a talent I do not have. So
Fantastic.
what we were going to do tonight, I thought, is a lot of these, as you mentioned, Rob, our house.
Yeah, Tom, can I just address one thing real quick?
Sure.
Just by way of back. First off, welcome to Lauren and Judge Cutler. The last time I was in front of you, you were wearing a black robe, so it's a different context. I welcome it. Thank you very much for your help, and I think a lot of people on this call have watched a lot of these chunks of various meetings and presentations, and we have tried to come into this reasonably prepared, but we really do appreciate having that out there for us to get up to speed with. So Tom, you anticipate it's going to be, you're going to present along with.
Yeah, I will present and the judge will back me up when I say something ridiculous. She's getting very good at that. She's very good at bailing me out, and then Lauren will do the same. But Lauren's going to do our screen, and what we were going to do is have the summary that Judge Cutler presented, prepared and had presented to the planning board at its formal hearing last week. And then we can also have the actual text of the articles themselves. So I heard you say just a brief background. The brief background is that the bylaw
Just one more thing, and I promise I'm going to shut up and let.
No,
you,
I want to keep you on schedule. That's all.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think I just want to tell the committee that, you know, Tom and I talked about preparing this a little bit. Briefly by way of background, and then I think we're going to go after the more let's call them less, I don't want to call them less controversial, but the more housekeeping items. And what I'd like to do, instead of everyone trying to keep all of these things in their head, is as we finish each bylaw, or where you've got a couple of bylaws that are put together, is if it's possible for us to do Q&A and vote them, like just bang them right out.
Good.
Until we get to a point where banging them right out isn't appropriate, we need to spend more time. But I'm concerned, if only for me, that trying to hold 6 or 7 articles in my head and then discuss and vote on them intelligently might be a bit of a stretch. So now I'm going to stop talking, Tom, and take us away. Thank you.
Okay, all right, great, thanks. Thanks, Rob. So just briefly, the zoning bylaw committee has existed since the last summer. It was charged by the select board. Prior to that, there was a bylaw working group, which was a subcommittee of the master plan implementation committee. And that has been working since 2021. So, it's close to 2 years that we've been working on these things. The game plan has been to split up, we're looking at the entire bylaw. It hasn't been comprehensively looked at since probably at least 86. And I mean that the core things such as uses, the dimensions, the real core of the bylaw hasn't been touched since then. We've added all kinds of things over the years from here, here and there. Almost every year there's a zoning article, but the add-ons haven't been done with looking at the whole bylaw, and it's become an organizational mess. There's definitions all over the place. So we want to clean it up. We're recommended by experts that towns should look at their bylaw at least every 10 years. And again, it's been 36 since we really looked at it in a comprehensive way. So the bylaw working group was working on its own. We did not have the assistance of counsel. With the bylaw committee, KP Law came on board with Judge Cutler. And the first thing they did was do what we call a diagnostic of the entire bylaw. It's 30 some odd pages and points out all kinds of things, both substantive and housekeeping, that are recommended to be done. So we've been working off of that. We've been working off ideas that members of the committee have had, and that brings us here. We've always planned to do this in at least two steps. That is the plan now. For this spring, we're doing a lot of housekeeping and groundwork on the administrative sections, just to lay the groundwork and the foundation for the changes that would come more substantively in the fall. There's 5 members of the bylaw committee. 2 of us are from the planning board, 1 from the select board, 1 from the master plan committee, and a citizen at large. We do have the room for 2 more people, so if anybody's interested, we have a big workload for the fall, so more bodies would be helpful. So I'll go into the summary then. We'll just get right into it. Lauren, if you could put up the summary and have the actual texts ready as well.
Sure. Did you want to share the summary first, or did you want to start? With
share the summary first. And so as I go through this, I don't know what warrant article numbers these are all going to have. There's going to be 6 articles. Some of the articles have multiple parts to them. Only one of them, Article 8, is going to actually be voted in 2 separate parts, but there's 6 articles total. We're going to refer tonight to the articles as they appear in the zoning bylaw, not the warrant article number. It might get a little confusing, but the first one up is Article 1 and Article 13. These are both administrative. They set out the purpose of the bylaw. 13 is really just 2 small paragraphs, and 13 will be eliminated and consolidated into Article 1. So you see the purposes of it is really, most of this article is a housekeeping. There's clarification of language, consolidation of language, eliminating redundant, unnecessary language. The bylaw, the current Article 1 lists a number of purposes of why we have a zoning bylaw. We're going to add 3 that you see in those bottom 3 bullets. As a result of the planning board hearing the other night, after the word housing, the word opportunities is being changed to options. We now have a master plan to conform to and to try to implement the objectives. So we are going to be looking at things in the fall with climate change, natural resources. So we think it's wise to add these 3 purposes for the purpose of the bylaw. So there really isn't much more to it. It can show you the text, perhaps, Lauren, if it's quick to show the text. This is really truly housekeeping, but and so you can just scroll through it and just And you'll see there's the three new purposes that have been added, G, H, and I, when housing has now become housing options. And we're getting rid of, redundant and unnecessary language and just making everything a lot clearer and cleaner as well. So the planning board the other night, the planning board, as you may know, has to have a formal hearing under the State Zoning Act on all zoning bylaw changes, and they make a recommendation, yay or nay. And they supported this article by a 6-0 vote. So unless there's any questions about it, I'll leave it to you if you want to take a vote or not. Anybody?
Tom, just a quick question.
Yeah.
You made mention, and when we were speaking the other day, you talked about this too, that this Article 13 will eventually be rolled into 1. If you just want to clarify that for folks, whether
Yeah,
that's.
I mean, so, yeah, so this article has, if we go back to the article, it has two parts to it. Part 1 is to make the actual amendments to Article 1 of the bylaw, and then down at the bottom, or the other direction, Lauren, if you could, thanks. And then further delete the text of Article 13. So Article 13 is a short 2-paragraph article of administrative stuff, and it's what it says is being wrapped into this new material for Article 1. So,
Great.
Okay.
With one exception, I should say, we eliminated 13.1, which talks about amending the bylaw, and that's governed by the statute, and there's no need to put it in there.
Right, there's a number of places here where our bylaw mentioned state law, and we really don't have to. We just need to rely on the state law. And a lot of times when you try to reword state law or restate it, you can end up making problems for yourself. So that's another theme of some of these amendments, is to just, don't add extra language we don't need to, and just rely on state law where you need to rely on it. So I leave it to you if you want to vote or ask questions as you go along, Rob. Again, the planning board recommended this 6-0.
Okay, I think probably permitting a few questions and then seeing if we, if it's ripe for a vote would be the way to go. Does anybody on the committee have questions relating to this amendment proposed? Okay, hearing none. What we need, and perhaps this is with some help from Chris, we need to take a vote that when somebody reads it, in terms of incorporating it into the warrant, that it tracks to the right thing. So what warrant article, can somebody tell me what warrant article we're voting on?
If it's been assigned a number yet, I don't know what that is.
Well, generally, I thought I had seen a draft warrant as of today, and we do it, we vote, if it's Article 17 in the warrant.
Yep.
As of today, we vote it, and then that vote can find its way to, wherever it finally ends up.
Okay.
Do we not have that, Chris? Anybody? I saw a warrant today. Let me take a look.
See if I can find it fast too.
I don't have the current warrant number, but it previously had been referred to as Article Z1.
Okay, I have it as in a document that's the warrant, draft warrant that I received today. I have it as it's Article 22, zoning bylaw amend Article 1, authority, purpose, and intent.
Okay.
Is that the one we're?
Yep.
Am I right? Okay.
Yep, that's it.
So, can somebody make a motion that the advisory committee recommends that town meeting approve the text of Article 22 in the warrant as of March 15, 2023, concerning zoning bylaw amendments to Article 1, authority, purpose, and intent.
I think I can do that.
I'm not going to make you restate it.
No, but
Ellen,
let
Go ahead.
me say what I have written out and then we can maybe tweak it and then we can vote it. Does that work?
Sure, it's your
Okay.
motion now. Go ahead.
Okay, so move to recommend to town meeting the Cohasset zoning bylaw article 22. Article 1,
Nope. Article 22,
Article
as it
22,
appears,
as it appears in the form presented to the meeting of March,
in the draft warrant as of March 15, 2022.
meeting of.
Rob, maybe you could forward that to the rest of the committee so that we all have it, because I don't have it. The form
the
of
draft
warrant from today.
Oh, I'll send that right this minute. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
thought that.
The one
ignored
that
everybody.
the one that I have is old. It is Article
Nope.
22 in the old one also.
It's in the one I have today. That's the work of a minute. I'll send that around.
Is it zoning article 1 or zoning article 1 and 13?
No, it's
Tom?
Article 22.
So Article 22, it's
Amendment
referencing
1.
Article 1 and 13 of the bylaw.
1 and 13.
1
So
and
it's
13, yeah.
Article 1 referencing zoning Articles 1 and 13.
Correct.
Okay, now it's really messy.
I got
I don't
it.
know.
Okay,
You
so
got it,
move-
Ellen?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a roll call vote. Gina Stino,
aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collin,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Nagy,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman. I too am an
Yeah.
aye. I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
Talking to myself, yeah. I said,
Oh, okay.
I
Good.
said, I have a copy of the warrant, but it was sent a couple of days ago, so.
I'm gonna send one right now.
All
I
right.
just, I'm sort of rooting around in a bunch of open windows and what have you, but I think I know where I'm at. So, good. We have completed that. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
We'll proceed to whatever's
All right.
next.
Thank you. All right, Lauren, if we can get the next one, the summary up, please. All right, so the next is dealing with zoning bylaw Article 3. This is our article that creates our zoning districts and has our zoning map. You can see that the housekeeping changes is to just update our list. There were a couple of errors. There's one thing mentioned as an overlay that's not really an overlay district. We are updating the reference to our zoning maps. Right now, we're operating like the main zoning map does not have all the districts on it that we created since it was last drafted. But we are going to hold off on retaining somebody to draft a new clean map when we're all done after the fall, because in the fall, there may be some issues of renaming districts or consolidating districts. So we're not going to finish the map, but what we're doing right now is mentioning everything in the various components that make up the map, and that will be fine for now. Then we are also just clarifying rules, and this came from KP's diagnostic about the zoning district boundaries. I don't know if you have any questions, but this is truly housekeeping. We're not making any substantive change at all. Judge Cutler, if there's anything you'd like to add, feel free. And then maybe Lauren, we can bring up the actual text. So you see, this is our, you find we call them the 10 base zoning districts, and that's what we have now. And then there are 5 overlay districts, and previously we had identified something else that really isn't an overlay. And if you go down to the map reference, it's now, we have a couple of maps there that together, 2 or 3 of them together, now create our zoning map. We'll put, as I said, we'll put together one clean map when we're done in the fall. And as far as the district boundaries, Judge, I'll leave that to you if you want to explain that, what change we made.
The only real change that we made, I mean, we clarified some of the language in the explanation of how district boundary lines are determined when you look at the map, if there's any question. But the only real change that was made has to do with a current provision that you have that allows the uses, and if a lot is divided by a zoning district boundary, a base district boundary, not an overlay district boundary, and you can extend the use that's allowed in one district into the adjoining district, the other portion of your lot, up to 50 feet. Under your or by 200 feet if the zoning board of appeals grants a special permit. The only change that we've made is that under the current bylaw, the sending district, if you will, the portion that you want to extend the use regulations of, under the current bylaw, that portion of the lot would have to meet all the lot width and lot depth requirements of the district. You couldn't use any portion of the other zoned lot to meet those requirements. And we've taken that out because generally speaking, when you're talking about lot width and lot depth, these are really not actively used areas. They're passive areas for purposes of zoning. And so it's consistent with state law that says you can use a portion of your lot that's outside the district as long as it's for a passive purpose like open space, setback, yards, and so forth.
One thing to note that, this is more of a technical issue than anything else, because I don't even know if we have that many properties that are split by zoning boundaries. We've been trying to think of any, nobody knows of an example. There may be one or two here and there, but and if there are any, I would think they might be along 3A where perhaps a lot extends from highway business into the abutting residential district, but I don't even know that we have these. So this is more of a technicality to comply with state law than anything else. I don't think it's going to have any substantive difference to what we've been doing. If there's any other questions, there's really not much else to say about this.
Well, Tom, picking up on that, is there any way of determining whether there are any lots that are divided by boundaries, zoning boundaries?
We would just have to look at the, well, to the extent the zoning map is I guess with our new GIS system, I suppose we can superimpose the zoning boundaries over parcels. The map that you often see that's on a wall in town hall in its different colors doesn't show individual parcels. So
right.
You can't tell from that map, but perhaps on our GIS layering, Lauren, I don't know, maybe we should have an answer for that for town meeting. I think we probably should. So with our layering GIS system, perhaps we can determine that, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. I think we're, care was given not to divide properties between districts when this was done years ago. So we'll make a note of that though, to get that information to have ready for town meeting in case the question comes up.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. Can we have a motion to the effect of, will the advisory committee recommend the town meeting approve Article
24.
24 as it appears in the draft warrant of March 15, 2023, amending zoning bylaw Article 3 concerning establishment of zoning districts?
So moved.
For a second.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. roll call vote. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman, I too am an aye. That concludes that article. Which one are we proceeding to now, Tom?
Okay, this will be zoning bylaw Article 6.
Okay, that's draft warrant Article 25, zoning bylaw Article 6. Take it away.
Okay. So this Article 6 deals with signs. We have a fairly extensive bylaw with a fairly long set of definitions of various different kinds of signs. There's 3 changes that are being recommended here. One is to clarify the definition of a political sign and actually change it to political or non-commercial, and also create a category of temporary political sign, which would be, campaign-related signs. But Judge Cutler, add to this if you wish, but this is more to comply with state case law to make sure that we are protecting not just political speech, but all other types of speech that are protected under the First Amendment. So that's the significance of those first 3 bullets. The second 2 bullets there are to expressly state that government signs are exempt from the sign bylaw. And then the last 2 bullets is, believe it or not, on freestanding signs, we've never had a height limit for how tall the sign can be. So we are recommending a height limit on the signs 10 feet in residential districts and 20 feet commercial districts. That just has not been there before. So, the text of the bylaw, we can put that up, but it's a fairly long article. But those are the changes that I highlighted are what we're trying to do here. And Judge Cutler, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Well, the current language has been modified to achieve our objectives in clarifying the language and where possible, ensuring that the language is internally consistent. The issue about the political signs is just, it's a broadening of the current bylaws, protections for political signs, by just making it clear we're not just talking about election issues or campaign issues. We're also talking, basically, if you're allowed to have a political sign, and you are allowed to have a political sign in every district as a matter of right, that sign can have any non-commercial message on it that the owner of the property wishes to put on it, consistent with the US Constitution. So if somebody wishes to put up a sign that says "Save the whales," they may do so. If they wish to put up a sign protesting something and they want it as a permanent sign, they may do so. There are also what we call temporary political signs, and those are really limited to a 60-day period of time. And on those signs, you would put your typical campaign electioneering messages, vote for John Smith for select board, or vote no on Article 24 at the town meeting, something like that. So those are just very temporary and aren't really restricted other than in time period.
I want to point out one thing about how we're approaching these articles. Lauren, if you go back to the summary for the first paragraph of the summary. Thanks. So up at the top, you'll notice we're adding 2 definitions. The approach to this, by the way, Article 2 is the article that deals with definitions, and I'm assuming that must be warrant Article 23 at the moment. We are making changes to definitions in a couple of different places, but for example, in Article 6, we're adding two definitions that will be found then in Article 2, but since they're
Well,
related,
actually, yeah.
since they're related to Article 6, we're doing it as part of this warrant article as step 2 of it. The same thing with Article 12. When we actually get to Article 2, there's just two minor change deletions, I believe. And then we are the main Article 2 change we're going to discuss as a separate article is the definition of height that we're going to get to tonight. But I just wanted you to know that we're following a principle of getting definitions in one place into Article 2, but in terms of this warrant, we are making changes to definitions that are related to the particular article that's at hand, like, for example, this one. So changes to definitions are actually in all three or four of these 6 articles. So, might be organizationally confusing, but we kind of know what we're doing, I guess, but just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Fran, I see a hand.
Yeah, I have a question on the height. Is that 10 feet in the air, or is that a 10 feet vertical width, size of the sign?
Well, the size of the sign is already regulated in terms of the area of the sign, the square footage. What is not regulated, except for signs that are attached to buildings, they are regulated. They can't be higher than the building. But freestanding signs have no limit. And so this is imposing a top limit of the sign from the ground to the top of the sign.
Okay, that's the sign, not just
So the whole thing, the
Yeah.
structure, the whole
I mean,
sign.
so we have a size limit on the sign itself, but right now you could put it on legs that are 60 feet tall into the air. If like you see on highways at rest areas and things like that. So we're trying to control that. So this is the actual physical height of the sign.
That's my question, Tom. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure that we.
Yeah, the sign structure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
freestanding signs are now defined as a separate structure.
Okay. Mike?
Yep.
Oh, hey, quick question. When you're going through this, you referenced the First Amendment. Can you go back to that part and just explain that one more time for me, please?
Yeah, can we have the text of the
We
article?
can't establish a religion. Actually, no, it's a different part of the.
Okay, if we go down to the bottom of that and we get to the definition portions. Okay, next page, I
Next
think.
page.
Next page. Okay, this definition is slightly different from your current definition of political sign. And basically, it says it's a sign which expresses the view of the owner or occupant of a premises concerning political, religious, or ideological matters, or a sign containing any other expression of non-commercial speech protected by the United States Constitution. It's very broad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, under the First Amendment, you kind of, the right of free speech is very, very broad. So,
Exactly.
so you can kind of have any kind of sign you want, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, there are limits on the number of signs that can be placed on any particular property. And so if you wanted to have your sign, let's say you're allowed to have 2 signs and you wanted them both to be political signs instead of commercial signs, that's your option. If you're a business and you don't want to put Joe's Auto Body Shop up, you want to put Save the Whales up, that's your choice. But you're limited on the number and the sizes of the signs that in the same manner. So political signs are treated in the same manner as other signs that are permitted on property. As I said, there's a difference in how we treat temporary political signs, which are, your typical paper signs, cardboard signs that go up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ellen?
So regarding that, is there a limit to the number of political or non-commercial signs allowed on residential property?
Yes, there is. So if we go back up a little bit to the residential districts. So signs allowed in residential districts, you're allowed 2 accessory signs identifying home occupation or another lawful accessory use. An unlighted temporary sign for sale or lease or repair of the premises, and an identification sign. And then in addition, you go back up to signs permitted in all districts, a little bit further back up. Yeah, political and non-commercial signs, and then the signs can't exceed the height limits. The sign area can't exceed the area of the largest sign allowed in the district. And except for temporary political signs, the number of signs may not exceed the number of commercial or other signs also allowed on that premises. So if you're allowed to have 2 identification signs on your premises, you could have up to 2 political signs, and those identification signs are relatively small in area, actually. So you're not going to have super large signs in residential districts. They won't be any larger than any other sign on the residential property.
And I have one more question, Rob, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
So when I was reading through this, I couldn't figure out if the flashing speed limit signs that are on movable, I'm going to call them stanchions or whatever, that you see on the roads, are those considered signs?
Those are governmental signs
Governmental, okay,
because they're put up by either the state or the town usually.
okay.
All right,
Because,
so the-
because the flashing of them and the coloration seems to be in a little bit of conflict with some of the other lighted signs in
Yeah.
the bylaw. in this
Yeah, we
article, sorry.
Wouldn't normally allow those by a private individual, couldn't put something like that up.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry if I'm misinterpreting this. So A4, except for temporary political signs, the number of non-commercial signs on a premises may not exceed the number of commercial. So temporary political signs, there's no limit on the number of those.
No limit, there's a limit on the number of days.
Okay, good. That was a question.
I guess
It's 60
my-
days, isn't it?
So you can,
Days
yeah.
max.
Okay, sure. Is there
Isn't it
any,
30?
is there anyone counting or enforcing? Like, I don't actually, this just seems like,
No, I mean, it's sort of typical. It's just to prevent an unnecessary proliferation of outdated signs or, having signs come up a year before the election, and having them hang out for another year or so. So you put the 60 days in, so you do have a baseline and, within a reasonable time, people haven't taken them down, you can tell them to take them down. We have a rule. So I don't think anybody's necessarily going around pounding the sidewalk looking for people who've kept it up for 61 days.
yeah, no, obviously, like,
Yeah, I think
it
the
just
only,
takes one, right? And we all just don't
Yeah.
want that one person to be our neighbor,
Right.
but okay.
I think the only enforcement I've ever seen happen is that when people put signs on that little green strip between the sidewalk and the road, they think is their property, but it's actually town property. The building inspector tells them to move it onto their lawn, and that's pretty much the only enforcement I've ever seen in 30 years living here, but.
That's fine. And I don't really think we should be in the business of counting days or enforcing this unless it gets egregious. And then it's be one neighbor reporting another neighbor. And thankfully, I don't have any of those neighbors. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, and the planning board supported this 6-0 as well. And they did the previous article. I forgot to mention that, but.
I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, I'd ask for a motion along the lines of, well, in the form, will the advisory committee recommend the town meeting approve Article 25 of the draft warrant as of March 15, 2023, amending zoning bylaw 6, Article 6, concerning, Tom, what's the topic of it? How would you
Signs.
capture the topic of this one?
Sign.
So moved.
Second,
Yeah, I'd make the lasting sign regulation. So we have a motion and a second. And any further discussion? Hearing none, vote by roll call, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi.
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. That one carries. So Tom, what's next?
All right, well, going a little out of order from the judge's summary, we'll go to Article 12. Which
So this
is
is
another
zoning Article 12.
zoning Article 12, which is another, it's titled Administration and Enforcement.
Okay, that's on the warrant for those of you who are following at home. That is Article 27. And
So
it's
I will tell
zoning
you, yeah,
12, administration and enforcement. Okay,
right.
Tom,
so-
go ahead.
Okay, and again, we don't see this as a lot of substantive change. It is very much a cleanup of language because certainly the first part about the building inspector enforcement, I've always thought is a gobbledygook that's hard to understand. So there's a lot of cleaning up of this. As far as substantive change, the fine that can be issued under the zoning bylaw is currently $100 a day. The state maximum is 300. Our Conservation Commission under its bylaw is at 300, so we're recommending bringing it up to the state maximum. And just so you know, unlike the Concom, the zoning board and the planning board cannot issue fines themselves. Only the building inspector has that power. We can recommend, but it's ultimately up to him. But, so that's one change. The next is we have updated the site plan review requirements and procedures. I'll let the judge explain what we're doing there, but site plan review is a review that the planning board conducts on commercial properties. It is not really a permit, it's more of a, have you addressed certain issues like traffic, circulation, access? Have you addressed those sufficiently so that it's safe? And so I'll let the judge explain what we're substantively doing and why it needs updating.
Yeah, the current site plan review is pretty extensive, but it needed some rewriting and a little bit of clarification as to when and how it applies. So as proposed, the requirement for site plan review will basically be addressed with respect to any new building, substantial alteration of a building, a change in use, which results in additional parking requirements being imposed under the bylaw, or a substantial alteration of parking or access areas for commercial, industrial, and multifamily use building or property. So it's just, it's a pretty broad requirement, but when you look at the definitions, the descriptions of what substantial alteration of a building is, we're talking about one that results in an increase of 500 square feet or 10% of the gross floor area, whichever is more. And a substantial alteration of parking, loading, or vehicular access, you're talking about a change in the layout. So the driveway layout, the parking and loading locations, an increase of 500 square feet or more of the area that's devoted to those activities. And then a substantial change in use is one, as I said, which just involves parking, additional parking requirements. So we've pretty much, I think we've strengthened the administration section of it. The planning board still will administer site plan review. It is not a special permit process. It is a relatively short time period. The planning board will have only 75 days to complete its review and issue a decision, or the site plan will be deemed approved unless the applicant agrees to an extension of time. There's only 3 circumstances under which a site plan could be approved, could be disapproved. The application is incomplete. the proposal doesn't comply with the zoning bylaw requirements, or there's no reasonable condition the planning board can devise to reduce significantly detrimental health and safety impacts from the proposed development. So for most instances, it's going to be conditions that would be imposed that would mitigate any potential impacts on neighbors or town, for that matter, or environmental issues. And looking at this, the process also lays out the standards of review, exactly what the planning board will be looking at in the course of site plan review. I think it's a little further down. No, maybe it's further up. No, I guess further up. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't have it open. You don't have the bylaw open, but there are the things that would typically be looked at would be the drainage of the site, how the parking and access are arranged, whether everything on the site, the building setbacks and so forth would comply with the zoning requirements. Looking at whether there's adequate provision for storage of snow, for storage of trash, and things of that type. It's not a design review in the sense that there's not really a lot of discretion about what the building looks like, although there might be a need for screening or buffer, vegetative buffering or something of that sort. Looking at the lighting to make sure it's not shining on adjoining properties, that sort of thing. So it's relatively straightforward. There's no direct appeal to the courts. If somebody is unhappy with the result, the process would be to eventually go to the zoning board of appeals. And once the site plan is approved, the building permit has to incorporate any conditions that are in that site plan decision, and any future modification would have to go back to the planning board if it's a substantial one.
All right. The planning board deferred a vote on this the other night because Woody Chittick had a particular issue, and it has to deal with that deletion of 304.2.
Which we won't be doing.
Yeah, if some of you recall, by an amendment that was made on the floor, somebody slipped in taking out what's called a use variance from our bylaw in 2002, and the town restored it in 2021, and that's found in 4.2, section 304.2 of the bylaw. So we've incorporated that into this Article 12, but Woody had a small issue with it that we think we've resolved with them, but we're meeting with the zoning board next Tuesday, the 21st. So the planning board will vote on this article on the 22nd. I will tell you that the bylaw committee is 5-0 in favor of this article, and then there was really no objection stated at the planning board, and I expect a 6-0 vote there. It's just what we wanted to give Woody an opportunity to be heard with his board on this. But if you're in a position to vote for it, we'd appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom. Ellen, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question regarding the substantial alteration and how those amounts were determined.
Well, the current bylaw, I think, talks in terms of 500 square feet, or is it 400? I don't remember now.
It's actually 200.
Is it 200? Yeah, it's less. But that's very small if you think about, if you have a small business building that's, I don't know, 2,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet, 10% increase is 300 square feet. That's not very much. 500 square feet seem to be sort of a reasonable amount. And again, depending upon what it is, let's say for the sake of argument that the 500 square feet doesn't really impact anything on the site. Maybe it's in the rear, maybe maybe the parking is currently all right the way it is. Well, that's something that the board would address through its regulations in terms of what is going to be required to be presented to the board. And if the board looks, if somebody submits an as-built plan and says, well, it's working perfectly fine, and I'm not proposing any changes, well, the board will consider whether in fact it is working fine. But they may require some substantiation of the drainage working properly or something of that sort.
Okay, because I actually Googled like how many cars can fit in 500 square feet. And I think it's like 3. So it didn't seem like a big alteration to have to undergo a review.
There may be minor site plan. Yeah, in other words, the planning board can determine whether there are certain things that merit only minor review, whereas others merit a lot more.
Okay,
But sometimes the 500 square feet might be in a rather disadvantageous location and might create a traffic safety problem or something like that. So the planning board should be able to look at it at least.
okay, thank you.
Lauren?
Just an example to speak to Ellen's previous question that I can think of is if you think about the ATM, it's Chase ATM that came into the Curtis Liquor Plaza. Back when that was constructed, there was no requirement that it needed to come to the planning board. And even though it's a relatively small space, it did have quite an impact on the traffic circulation of that parking lot. So that was an example that we used when thinking about this kind of a modification, because in that scenario, you may want to take a look at circulation and impacts in that sort of situation.
Okay, thank you.
And safety.
Other questions, comments? Okay, then can I have a motion to the effect that will the advisory committee recommend the town meeting approve Article 27 of the draft warrant as of March 15, 2023, amending Article 12 of the zoning bylaw, administration and enforcement.
So moved.
Motion second,
Second,
Patrick. Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Alan Marr,
Aye,
Miriam McGoldrick.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman, I am an aye. The ayes have it. So, Tom, what's
Okay.
next?
All right, next will be zoning Article 8. I'm going to presume is warrant Article 26.
And Article 8 confirms non-conforming uses, structures, and lots.
Right, this article is primarily within the purview of the zoning board. Deals with all of our non-conforming lots and structures. And this is one that is going to be voted in 2 separate parts. The first part will do essentially housekeeping changes to the entire article. And this is another example where there's some consolidation and cleaning up things that are, taking out things that are unnecessary. The definition of abandonment that is currently found in Article 2 definitions will be moved into this article, Article 8. It's the exception to our rule of consolidating our definitions because it really refers to this article. And the abandonment definition will be changed slightly. The second part of the article that'll be a separate vote will then be to amend what's called the single lot exemption and Cohasset's unique spin on that law. The first part will just deal with will basically incorporate our single lot exemption provision as it now stands. Part 2 will actually change it, and the change is to basically bring in a cutoff date. This we thought was going to be complicated. It can be complicated, but it's proven in our discussions and public forums not to be complicated and not to be controversial. But in the nutshell, the single lot exemption is something created by state zoning law. And it says if you have a lot of that's zoned for 1 or 2 family use, and there is a zoning bylaw change to certain dimensions, frontage, frontage setbacks and area, I believe are the ones, you will have perpetual, and your lot was created of record before that zoning change was made, you will have perpetual grandfathering. And grandfathering is now not the term of art, but you'll have a perpetual grandfathering as long as that lot is not in common ownership with any of the lots around us. Then the state law goes on to create an exception if you do have that common ownership problem. But under the state law, you would have had to act on it within 5 years of the change, or 5 years from January 1, 1976, which was the effective date of the current state law. Cohasset changed that. And basically on our exception, when you do have the common ownership problem, we've made it open-ended. I mean, there's no time limit, there's no cutoff as to when you can exercise those rights. We do require a larger minimum lot size to exercise that exception than state law does. But you know, the most recent court case on this was in 2017 for a property on Atlantic Avenue. The court said Cohasset's rule is open-ended. You know, this lot has to be built. And what it's allowing is lots that are now undersized under our bylaw, based on the wisdom of town meetings setting what a minimum lot size should be, can still be built on. And there's no time cutoff for that. When our bylaw was originally passed in 1955, we did have a requirement that the only lots that could get the exception were those that were created before the effective date of that bylaw, which was, I believe, June 30, 55. When we amended our bylaw in 78 to comply with the major change of state law that occurred in 76, we got rid of that time limit. And we are unique in that. We haven't found another town that's like that. And so what this change would do would bring in a cutoff that the lot would have to be created before June 30, 2023. And what the effect of that is that we will cut off creation of new rights under this bylaw going forward after June 30, 2023. Now when the bylaw working group originally took up this idea a year and a half ago, we talked about repealing it. And then a citizen brought up a case to our attention from the Supreme Judicial Court. Orleans once had a bylaw like ours. The lot in question was legal under that unique Orleans bylaw in 1970. They repealed the bylaw in 71. They sought to build on it in the late 90s. And in the year 2000, the court made the decision 30 years after the repeal. And they basically said that if a town creates extra grandfathering rights at some point in time, and a lot has the benefit of that, that lot will always have the benefit of that, even if you repeal it or amend it. So the important thing to note here is that we are not changing anyone's rights who might currently have rights under the Cohasset bylaw as it exists today. We can't. Whether we appeal this, we do this amendment, anybody who has rights today will still have rights. We can't determine how many lots those are that have those rights. We originally thought it was 76 at one point, but that was in trying to go off assessor's records, which are a slightly different animal than the records at the Registry of Deeds. You would have to do a title search on each individual property and see if it qualifies. But anybody who has rights.
I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt on that for 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
It's more than just lots that are currently non-conforming under the bylaw. This current, the bylaw as now giving extra protections, protects prospectively non-conforming lots. So a lot that all the lots that are currently conforming to today's zoning have a potential in the future to become non-conforming.
Okay.
Those lots, when they become non-conforming, can go back and rely upon this current protection,
That explains it.
okay? It's
Yeah.
only prospective lots, new lots that are created after this cutoff date that won't be able to go back and rely upon this forever protection.
Right.
So can I ask,
So we are essentially, yeah, Patrick, if I may, we essentially are going back to an approach to this that we had in 1955 that we abandoned in 1978 for whatever reason. But everyone who has rights today under the current bylaw would continue to have them. It is new lots that are created in the future that will not be able to get the benefit of this unique exception. I'm sorry, Patrick.
Patrick
way I-
and Mary.
it runs with the land. It's not the current owner who gets the benefit. It continues with the land
A
regardless.
lot of record, yeah.
Right.
the Lot, it's described in the recorded deed or plan.
So any new subdivision that's created and all the lots aren't built on it after whenever this isn't.
Okay, if the
then
subdivision,
they will not have that, that's called the grandfather clause again.
Well-
They will be subject to whatever changes may come later on, which may make them unbuildable. Is that the point?
well,
No,
yes,
unless they're not common ownership with the abutters, because the first part of our bylaw mirrors the state law, which says that if you are zoned for 1 or 2 family use and not in common ownership, there's no common ownership in the history of that lot, then you will have a perpetual grandfathering for
Yeah.
any subsequent change. But if a typical subdivision is at one point in common ownership with a developer, yes, the likelihood is that a subdivision that's created after July 1, 2023 is not going to get the benefit if the town in the future makes a zoning change to frontage or area or
Good, that's what I heard. I just
those
wanted to clarify.
those lots are protected for 8 years from the date of the endorsement. So if they meet the requirements of zoning at the time that the lots are approved, those lots have the benefit of retaining their conforming status for 8 years after the plan is endorsed. It's only after that 8-year period that they have to be separately owned to qualify for state protection. But under this current bylaw special, I call it a special exception, if you will, or special protection, that 8 years wouldn't matter. Those lots would go on and on and on.
Okay.
All right, and the planning board did endorse both parts of this 6-0.
Okay, Mary?
Yes, could you, maybe I'm being dense here. Can you give me an example of how a new lot is created?
Well, you have to create a lot through a subdivision, usually through a subdivision plan and record it at the registry of deeds up and down.
So this is why you had primarily developers in your public review the other night.
Yeah, I mean,
Or you could own a large lot of land and deed a piece of it to a third party and go to the planning board for an approval not required plan and get that recorded.
But it would have to be non-conforming.
No, it would have to be conforming at the time that it was recorded in the registry of deeds.
Okay,
And if it is, then it's forever protected from increases in area or frontage, lot width or area width or frontage requirements. If they were to change, they're protected.
thank
They're
you.
not protected from necessarily from setback increases or height of building changes or something like that, but the lot itself is protected.
Okay, Jean?
Does this bylaw article in any way, is it any way Does it in any way affect easements?
No.
Okay. Simple answer.
And again, this, you know, a year and a half before the 2021 fall meeting, when we first proposed a repeal, that got some interest from citizens, non-developer citizens, and thinking we were taking some rights away. But again, I want to emphasize, we are not taking anybody's rights away who has existing rights. We just don't want this open-endedness to continue on ad infinitum. You know, when the town makes a judgment, it wants lots to be of certain sizes. We should stick to that, basically. And you know, but if I can, I won't speak for the zoning board, but I don't anticipate that we're going to see any opposition since this is an article they administer. You know, Woody has participated in some of these things, and I don't anticipate any opposition from them. And frankly, the developers who attended our meetings didn't oppose it at all. So.
Okay. Any further questions? So-
Just a real quick one.
Go ahead, Mary.
Interrupt. Tom, you mentioned this is going to be voted in 2 parts.
Oh,
Right.
You beat me to
So-
my question. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Tom.
so the first part is just to do housekeeping of the entire Article 8 and essentially leaving our unique single lot exemption provision as it is. It'll be moved around. It'll become 8.6 instead of 8.3, but the first part of it is just a housekeeping, and then the second part is to change that single lot exemption exception that we have and add that cutoff date of June 30, 23.
So is this going to be presented to town meeting as a separate article from? the
It'll be
housekeeping
2
part?
votes. It'll be 2 votes. So
So it'll be 2
part
articles.
Part A and B will be 1 vote, part C will be another vote.
Okay, so it'll have to be, I mean, maybe I'm being dense or overly formal, but I think there's only one vote per article and 1 article per vote. So
No,
I
we've
would
done this.
anticipate.
No,
I
we've
would- all
done,
right.
we've done this before, and then, you know, the community preservation one does it this way too. They have 1 article with multiple parts in it.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we've approved dozens of these. not
Yeah,
just-
no, we've done
basing it.
zoning
Okay.
changes. We've done
All
zoning
right.
changes. this
Well,
way.
why don't we do this? Why don't we go through the single lot exemption part? And if it's the sense of this committee that we can do this all on 1 vote, which then can be parsed into a final recommendation on the warrant, we'll do that. If we have any, we do this the same way we do the CPC. We hear it all and then we vote. And then if there are, you know, if one of them is going to be 8-0 and the other one's going to be 7-1 or 3-4, we'll deal with it then. So why don't you go ahead with the single lot exemption part, and we'll see where that gets us. Hello?
Me or a motion? You guys want a motion?
No, I was thinking, why don't you go through the single lot exemption part of this, and then we'll see if we can do the whole
Oh,
thing. in
well,
one motion.
I kind of did. I mean, it's down here in the part C of the article.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
It's just simply changing the text to add the cutoff date of June 20.
Right,
June
okay,
30.
so we'll just do 1 vote, and if, when
Yeah.
it comes down to drafting the warrant, okay, that'll.
Yeah,
work.
planning board did this all as 1 vote and just,
Great, then we'll do the same. So we'd be looking for a motion, whether the advisory committee recommends the town meeting approve Article 26 of the draft warrant as of March 15, 2023, amending zoning bylaw 8 concerning non-conforming uses, structures, and lots.
So moved.
Motion? Fran, second?
Second,
Patrick, discussion? Okay, vote. Roll call, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collin,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
aye,
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman, I am an aye. That carries. Tom, what's next?
last one, on schedule. All right, so this is where we are isolating out some of the changes to Article 2 definitions. We can bring that up. So the first are two housekeeping changes. And then the one that has generated some discussion is the change to the definition of height. And the planning board has did not take a vote on this. We're going to vote on it on the 22nd. We kind of wanted to see how you weighed in and zoning weighs in on it. But here's the thing. So first, we separate the issue of the number of how high buildings are allowed to be in town from the definition. And that's getting somewhat confused. But right now, the town allows for a 35-foot height in every district, any kind of building. Okay. If we are to make any changes to that number, the 35, which is within an acceptable range in suburbs around us, we are going to deal with that in the fall when we are dealing with the table of dimensional regulations in Article 5. That's where you lay out frontage, height, lot coverage, blah, blah. All the numbers are dealt with in Article 5 in that chart. That's when we're going to deal with this. This is to deal with how you are measuring that 35 feet on a given site. And there's two components to it. One is, where do you start measuring from the bottom? Since we generally do not have a lot of flat pieces of land in town. And one of the things we found in practice is that sometimes developers give us 2 data points, sometimes 4, and then they say this is the mean grade and they measure from there. We wanted to increase the number of data points that were being used. So we have 12 at the suggestion of a developer who was at our meeting. It's 12 measurements. The 10-foot interval part is being taken out. It's going to be 12 equidistant around the foundation. Under our current bylaw, we do that measurement 10 feet away from the foundation. Nobody had ever questioned it until the planning board forum the other night, the hearing the other night, and a citizen had questioned it. So we are changing that as well, so that the measurement will be made at the point of the prospective foundation. Everyone agrees with that, of having more data points to get what is the mean grade at the bottom of the measurement. So that was a 5-0 vote in the zoning bylaw committee for the bottom measurement. The issue that's been brought up is the top. And on the top, our current definition measures everything to the highest point, except with the case of a peaked roof. We, for whatever reason, measure it to the midpoint of a peaked roof and then allow for no more than 5 feet above that. So theoretically, even though the town has said a height limit is 35 feet, you could have a 40-foot high structure. And data that the working group had put together is looking at large home reviews. We have not had a lot of houses that have exceeded 40 feet or been at 40 feet, but we've had some that are pushing the limit. We think we should be proactive here because the trend certainly is maximizing sizes of houses as much as possible and other buildings, including ones in the village. The new building at 1 Pleasant Street is a peaked roof structure. It is not 40 feet high. It is 33.5 to the midpoint. It is 37.10 inches, I believe, at the highest point. The new project that's still under permitting at 55 South Main is not at 40 feet either, although there's a perception these things are very tall. But we think it's both common sense just to measure every roof at its highest point, and number 2 is to eliminate the loophole that a structure with a peaked roof could in the end of the day be 40 feet high rather than 35 feet. There's been arguments made that this would take away a story. The logic of that escapes me when you think about how tall a story is, particularly in a house. I think you can still get a 3-story structure in this. And then it's been melded together with the issue of the actual number. And, should we be allowing 40? I don't think anybody wants 40-foot high structures in residential districts, but should we allow it in the village?
No.
Don't know. Should we allow it on 3A, particularly when it was brought up at the last minute by the Affordable Housing Committee as well? This would be a deterrent to building affordable housing because you'd only be able to do 2.5 stories. Again, I dispute it would be 2.5, but you know, we do have to do the housing choice legislation from the state that's being forced upon us. We are going to have to create zoning for multifamily housing. We intend to deal with that in the fall. And maybe we make the value judgment that out there on 3A with a multifamily structure, we will allow it to be higher. But that's a decision for the fall when we talk about the actual number. How we measure it, it should be from a mean number at the bottom, measured by 12 points, 12 reference points, and to the highest point of the structure. That's the logic behind this. So there is, on the bylaw committee, 3 votes in favor for this, 2 votes against it. Planning board, I won't speak for, we didn't take a vote yet. There's been a sentiment of putting this off, the definition off to the fall to deal with in conjunction when we address the number in the table of area dimensions. I know Judge Cutler could speak to that, why we should just go forward with this now. The majority here believes that we should, the majority of the bylaw committee believes we should go forward with this. The bottom measurement with the 12 reference points, because it did come up and was a problem with a recent large home. That is being implemented as a matter of policy already by the building inspector. He is asking for more reference points. But we think to close this loophole, we should change the definition. And then later, if we think 35 feet is appropriate or inappropriate in different parts of town, we can deal with that when we deal with the table in the fall. And Judge, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, I think my only concern was we've got a lot on our plate in the fall, and to postpone this yet again is just one more additional article that's going to have to be presented in the fall. And if we can address this at this town meeting, because simplifying matters, I think if there seems to be an unusually large number of people who are opposed to measuring the slope roofs at the midpoint, there is probably an easy fix amendment that could be made on the floor, which would keep the measurement of the slope roof exactly as it is now. It's easy to do, and it would only take a little bit of wordsmithing, but not much. And that would hopefully alleviate that. And then again, we could still deal with the actual height issue come fall. But I think overall, this satisfies the building inspector. He was concerned that the current definition was a little bit too loose.
Yes, yeah, he does support this change as well. And again, the trend that we're seeing, particularly in planning, when we look at our large home reviews, is we're seeing more and more houses these days pushing the limit on our maximum size. The working group had developed data on how much the house sizes have changed just since the year 2000. There's been a substantial increase in the size of houses in town. And, somebody has asked, what problem you're trying to solve? Well, it's logic in closing a loophole. It's trying to anticipate problems. And sometimes that's why you change a bylaw as well, is to be proactive rather than reactive to situations. But we did have one a year or so ago that really was pushing these limits, and was problematic for us to deal with. So.
Okay, questions, Mary?
Yes, what are our neighboring communities' zoning regulations on this? Do we know?
We looked at, one of our members looked at Situate and Hingham the other night, and this gets more to the number itself, where they both say 35 feet or 3 stories or 2.5 stories. So they use both a numerical measurement and a floor measurement, and then there must be somewhere where they they must identify what a story or a floor is, but that's just on the number thing that we'd be dealing with the fall. I actually don't know how many towns do this. I don't know if Judge Cutler has a better sense of other towns.
Well, the towns all do different things and they vary in
Over the map, yeah.
detail. There's some that have, 15 definitions related to story and how floors are measured and, where they measure to the ridge line and where they measure to the knee walls. And I mean, they can get very, very complex, or they can just simply say from the ground to the top of the structure. They vary.
That's kind of where I live, but when did we come up with the midpoint on a peaked roof?
I don't know if we trace the history back that far where it came in, but I will say this, a lot of things happened in 1978. That's when, we and other towns had to conform our bylaws to the new state, the current State Act 40A came into effect January 1, 76. And we all had to make changes. And like with the single lot exemption and a few other things, I don't know, something happened. We made a lot of changes, and this might have been one of them. I'd have to go back to our 55 bylaw and see what the definition was then.
There was a big blizzard in February '78.
Certainly was.
So,
Just one more quick question. Tom, do you foresee any changing of the minds on the zoning bylaw committee? I mean, are people pretty steadfast in their positions? Only because a split decision sometimes has a tricky time on town meeting floor.
yeah, no, the bylaw committee, well, let's just say the bylaw committee and the planning board has one strong opponent. Same person.
Okay,
One of the votes in the bylaw committee that was opposed probably shouldn't have been taken, given who it was and what property they own, but that's neither here nor there. And, it's really, right now, I think I can't speak for the rest of the planning board, but I didn't hear anybody jumping out the other night either, so I don't know, we'll see, but we wanted to get, on the planning board, we wanted to get a sense of how you thought about it and how zoning thought about it. And the decision either would be, I think the strategic decision really before us, and it's been suggested by people on other boards that we just punt this to the fall, but again, we have 6 articles here. We're going to have much more than 6 in the fall. It's going to be a lot to deal with, and we don't think this is, those of us in the majority don't think this is super controversial. It's common sense. So, but but with respect to the person who's opposed to this, I don't expect the position to change.
Fran, your hand is still up? Is that?
Yeah, this building height controversy has gone on for quite some time. And I really think that we've got to really pen this right down as to what exactly it is. I mean, a builder can build a foundation that sticks up, 10 to 15 feet in the air and then backfill around it and then start. And where does he measure from now? Does he measure from the bottom of the
We
plane?
take care of that, Fran, in this
Yeah.
definition of making sure it is the lower of the pre-construction grade of the post. So a guy can't come in and bring in a bunch of fill and then start measuring from the fill.
That's exactly right. And, then you get this great big, huge looming structure that just doesn't do anybody any good. And still in all, a 35-foot. Now, this is a story and a half house that I'm in, built in 1780. We do just fine with that story and a half house. So a 35-foot house would certainly give you, 2.5 stories or really 3 stories, just because you got a sloping ceiling, doesn't mean it's not habitable. So I don't see the big problem with going over 35 feet. I think that should be rigidly enforced, and it should be the top, the highest point of the roof, except the chimney. That's how I would see it.
Ellen?
How does this height requirement impact any homes? Like that would be in a flood zone where they have to elevate the main level off. I know that happens in Situate probably a lot more than here. The main level is 8 feet off the ground.
Yeah, so Yeah, there's two things about that, is that from the working group through the bylaw committee, the only place we've talked about to date about changing the 35-foot number is in the harbor, because in the harbor, you do have to account for flood elevation. So you have to, your starting point is at some point in the year where the flood elevation is. There was a citizen during the public forum a couple of weeks ago that brought up, well, as we get into climate change and houses might have to be raised in the future, existing houses, how are you going to deal with the 35-foot limit then? So that's not something we had thought about, but we are thinking, we are going to bring forward an initiative on a climate change bylaw or climate resiliency, and that's something we're going to have to think about. But that more deals with, again, with the number and what exceptions we allow for an existing home to deal with changing climate or flood situations. It still doesn't change the logic of the top should be the highest point of a building. Whatever the number is, you apply to that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I know for my part, I listened carefully to the objection. And I have a certain amount of sympathy for third floors and peak roofs and what have you, but I think, and maybe even just looking around my fairly tightly packed neighborhood, that you have to put a limit someplace, and this seems to be as reasonable as any. So I then persuaded myself back out of it. So that's my 1/9 of the committee's point of view. Are we prepared to vote on this proposed article?
Rob, it seems like we have a couple voices indicating that a simpler approach to this would be just a max 35 and not allow for the peaked, the shenanigans that go on with measurements and all that. That's what I heard Fran say.
Yep.
And it's kind of
Tom,
my
is,
view.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's kind of like a simpler approach to it than Judge Cutler said other towns have gone that route. So, it sounds like the objection that was voiced earlier was in the other direction. That, like what would be the impact of us objecting or having a dissenting vote because we think it should be capped at 35. What's your view on that, Tom?
Well, the objection, as I understand it, is more about having architectural flexibility. And, and separate residential from commercial because they'll have different story requirements. But if you allow for a 10-foot high story in a residence, that's kind of on the high end. And I don't know how many of us have 10-foot high ceilings, but 10 times 3 is 30, and then you have 5 more on top. You can do a 3-story structure within the 35 feet on a peaked roof house and have it at the top. The issue of garages has been brought up where we have a 15-foot height limit and that we're all of a sudden going to see a rash of flat roof garages. I don't think so. And then still you can get a car and a usable space above the garage in 15 feet. And if, again, in the fall, if we think that's not right, then maybe we allow garages to go to 20 or 17 or something. But again, separate the number from the logic of the definition and closing what is now an existing loophole that could allow for 40-foot residential structures, which I can tell you from the planning board, nobody wants to see. Nobody, when we have citizens come to these large home reviews, nobody wants to see a 40-foot high building. Houses start popping up all over town.
Well, I like closing the loophole because the loophole is overtaken the rule.
Yep. With this,
Fran?
if you look at the drawing on the right with the at the 35-foot, they left off one very important piece of construction detail on there. That most of these houses that are 1.5 stories or 2.5 stories all have dormers, and you can put a dormer up and pick up the extra space that you would like to have or need in that space. So you basically have a 3-story house.
And
That's an
one,
excellent point. That's quite true.
yeah, and one pleasant street in the village has dormers. And as I said, it's 37 10.5 at its highest point at the peak. And it's 3 stories of space, 1 residential or 1 commercial floor and 2 residential floors.
Yeah, I think any quibbles over what that means in practice. I walk past that building 2 or 4 times a day, depending on how much my dog drags me around. And that's a big building. I think it's gonna be a nice building. I think it works in that space, but you look at that and then plunk it down in the lot next to you. And I think it's a sobering moment of what is, even shortening it to what's permitted. It's a big building.
And
I like height. I don't have a problem with it. But I think it's a pretty reasonable limitation.
Yeah, and if that building was subject to this definition, it would be 2 feet, 10.5 inches shorter.
And it'd still be big.
And it's
In a
still,
good
have-
way,
it
but
would
big.
still have 3 floors.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I'm
I
good
think we're
with
gonna
it.
stick with the 35 feet. That's it. Never mind extensions of finding wacky places to measure from. It's the highest part of the structure is 35 feet and that's it. Goodbye.
it's
Well,
just.
I think I'm sorry, Tom, I think the
No,
work
that's all right.
you
Go ahead.
did in defining, in putting a much more rigorous definition on where the base is. I mean, anybody who's been paying attention knows what that's responding to. I think that's thank you for, paying it that close attention and getting a good standard. So further questions, comments? Want to go ahead and vote on this? The motion would be, does the advisory committee recommend the town meeting approve Article 23 of the draft warrant as of March 15, 2023, amending zoning bylaw 2? Do I have a motion? Come on, don't leave me hanging.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, Mary got to it first, second.
Second.
Who was that? Patrick?
Patrick.
Mike Barclay.
Mike Bartley.
Excellent. Oh, it's Mike. Very good. Further discussion? Hearing none, vote by roll call. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Van Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman, I too am an I. That concludes it, does it not, Tom?
It does. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention to this. And again, we have room for 2 members and a lot of work for the fall. If you know anybody, I don't know if you guys are prohibited from serving on another board, but we take all.
It's regarded as the most attractive reason to sit on advisory is that we are barred by bylaw sitting on anything else.
Since you all were stimulated by our meetings, think of what you're missing,
Well, we'll probably have some jockeying to see who will be our liaison, I'm sure. Regrettably,
I
none of
want to
us-
thank Lauren and Judge Cutler for being here tonight.
so do we. We really appreciate it. It's a late night. I know you guys have been working very, very hard on this. So I think the nicest thing we can do is thank you again and let you go. Yes.
Thank
All right,
you. Thank
appreciate
you.
it very
Excellent.
much. All right,
Thank you,
thanks a lot.
everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, that went well.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to see some of the other meetings on this, but I thought it was thorough and people have done their homework, so thank you, and we got through it. Yay. So we have a couple of other things on the agenda. I didn't want to keep any department heads up late. But we did, and I wanted to leave room in case this thing ended up being a half an hour or an hour longer than it was, but it wasn't. But we did have a couple of housekeeping items, or not quite housekeeping items, including a vote on the South Shore Voc article. And people are feeling ready for that. And also Chris had provided some material on something called the Valor Act. And I don't have, I've got about 100 documents on my desktop, one of which is not our agenda, which strikes me as dumb. but let me see if I can get it. There it is. Actually, I'm not even sure I have the amended agenda. So, Chris, do you want to, shall we do the proposed Valor? No, the next thing on the agenda was the vocational technical school article. So members will recall that we had a presentation about amending, whether town meeting will vote to amend the agreement that forms the school district for the South Shore Vocational Technical School in Hanover. And it's essentially, Chris, to admit Marshfield, yes?
Yes.
Okay, it's Article 13. It appears
It was
on the,
It was a little bit more than that. It was Marshfield, and they were just changing how it was primarily Marshfield and how they kind of contribute into the reserve fund over the next
Yes.
number of years. And it also made some tweaks to how certain processes happen to come into better conformance with current state law, if I recall.
yeah, I mean, those, I've, in my work life, because this is what I do for fun. I have dealt with, regional vocational technical school and other regional school district agreements, and they're pretty complex, but they by and large work. Yeah, the summary that appears in the document that I circulated, or that was circulated today, primarily for town of Marshfield and other changes to the agreement. We had a presentation. Is there any discussion? Do we want to go ahead and vote on this? I think I sent around the actual amendments and the markup in the agreement, which is a not terribly extensive red line, but it was a red line.
That come today?
That was
No, that was a couple of weeks ago.
We had a whole presentation. on this
Yeah.
from the-
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did. I mean, we did everything but vote, because at the time, I don't think the paperwork was done.
At the invitation of the superintendent, he invited all of us to come and have a tour of the school. I went over essentially unannounced. I gave him about 40 minutes notice and he said, come over. And he took me on a grand tour of the school, so there wasn't a dog and pony show. And I can't tell you how impressed I was with the physical plant, how well maintained it was, how clean and spotless it was. The shops were outstanding. All of the equipment in the shops was state of the art. The depth and breadth of what they do over there, I didn't realize they did as much as they do. It was very, very impressive. The students all looked good. They were busy working, and they have a week in the classroom and then a week in the shops. And it's I think it's a magnificent thing. I'd like to see more kids from Cohasset go over there, to tell you the truth.
It's a good program, and I think it's an important addition. Cohasset was an addition to what we already offer students. Cohasset was a charter member, so Cohasset's been in that since the outset. From my perspective, adding a town, I was surprised Marshfield wasn't part of the district. And adding a town that's bigger, it'll add more students, but it'll strengthen the sort of the basis from which the school draws its budget. So
Interesting story. The superintendent said they have made great attempts to attract some of the students from Cohasset. They try to get in touch with the 8th grade kids, and there was a great deal of reluctance in the school department to give them access to the 8th grade kids. And they finally, could they give them the names? Well, they wouldn't think about that. And then they said, can we have a half an hour to talk to the 8th grade before they go up into the 9th grade and high school kids? And they said, well, we'll tell you who you can talk to. So that was not very productive. And I think that was, I was really shocked to hear that. We don't know, all the kids that go to Cohasset High School don't have to go to a 4-year college. Somebody's got to fix the leak in the pipe. Somebody's got to put the shingles on the roof. Somebody's,
yeah, and a lot of, and in other vocational, I don't know this one as well as I know some others, but they tend to have, a fair number of kids go on to college, and they take
absolutely.
those skills plus a business degree, and the next thing you know, they've got 7 plumbing trucks and their boat is bigger than your house.
Exactly
So,
right.
there's nothing wrong with that.
But it's remarkable. And they give them basic business courses, finance courses, economics courses. you know. So
So are
they
we-
put out a magnificent product, and for whatever reason, the Cohasset School Department has decided that we're too good for the vocational school, I guess.
Well, that's outside of our lane, although that, you know.
Well,
certainly-
just as an anecdotal comment, you know.
Yeah, no, it's not unimportant. It's just, so do we, I'm comfortable voting on this.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any, before we go to a motion, some discussion, comments, Ellen?
Yeah, I just, I'm not adverse to having Marshfield join the district. I guess I have two questions. One, there was conversation about they finally were accepted by MSBA to build a new building after 7 tries. Am I recalling that correctly?
Yep.
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 So I guess I'm interested in the math of what the contribution from Cohasset might be on that building, and maybe, you know, it's not going to impact my vote, but I think that's something that we should know, you know, for going forward. And two, in the budget that we received, that I guess we were supposed to review last week, but for whatever reason, there's and I don't, Chris, I don't know if it's complete, you know, well, the budget obviously isn't complete. There's a lot of departments not in here, but there's a larger allocation for South Shore VOTEC for FY24 than in the past. Do you know why that might be off the top of your head?
Yes, it's an enrollment increase. So there are 3 more kids going in the coming cycle. That's the reason for our increase. We pay a share based on number of kids who go.
Yep, okay,
So there's 3 more kids going.
3 more kids. Okay, thank you.
My recollection on the first question was that was addressed during the presentation, and that by adding Marshfield, the overall contribution by the member towns such as Cohasset would decrease as a percentage of the total that needed to be contributed by the towns. So adding Marshfield lowers the overall contribution that Cohasset might have to make down the road as for its portion of the building. And I think it was a renovation and not a new building, but it was a renovation and maybe some additional square feet. It wasn't a complete new building, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was looking for the minutes. I couldn't find them.
The superintendent said they had the approval for a much bigger school, but he said they didn't envision anywhere near that sort of an enrollment, so that, you know, that still was up in the air as to how big an addition they were going to have, or how big a piece of new construction they were going to have.
That was my recollection as well, based on a conversation with Superintendent Hickey. I think he also stated there just wasn't physical space, right?
Yeah.
To build a much more on their piece of land in Hanover, and they're not looking to relocate. So,
Right.
Does that help? Is there anything else I can
Yeah,
answer?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So we move the question.
So, yeah, I'll ask for a motion. Does the advisory committee recommend that town meeting approve Article 13 as it appears in the draft warrant as of March 15, 2023, concerning approval of amendment to the regional agreement with South Shore Regional Vocational Technical School, Regional Vocational School.
So moved.
Motion, second.
Second,
Fran got there first. So further conversation? Hearing none. No, roll call vote, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy. Patrick,
I said aye.
oh, I'm sure that you did, but Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
aye.
and Rob Hillman, I too am an aye. The Valor Act. Just in terms as of an aside relating to the things we discussed earlier. And we'll probably vote on at an upcoming meeting. it might be worth reading the news stories on the city of Newton. And there were some school and non-school related overrides and repairs that went to the voters, and they got some fairly mixed results. I don't know that Newton with 80,000 people is much of a bellwether for Cohasset, but still, it's a data point. And we haven't voted on that article, so I don't propose to do so now, but let's put it on the agenda for one of the upcoming meetings. But Chris, I'll stop talking now. Well, the Valor Act, what, where does that?
So what the Valor Act is at least the piece that we're talking about, there's many components to it, but the one that affects the Cohasset is it creates a tax work-off program for eligible veterans. And eligible veterans are people who qualify as a veteran under certain standards. It's, you can't be dishonorably discharged, and there's a number of other technical specifications. So there's not an income limit in the law, though some communities do have one. And what it allows you to do is work off up to $1,500 as a credit against your property tax bill, using every hour of contribution of time as minimum wage, $15. So if you want to get all $1,500, you have to work 100 hours. And you have to work in a program that's adopted by the select board. And we're actually working to put something together now. Most communities have a program with some cap, the number of people who are participating. And the work, we're trying to find work that really makes sense, that's substantive and that's fairly broad-based. Things like data collection and data, assistance. And one thing that we've kicked around is, dog licensing, is making sure that all our database is clean and the applications are clean and, and all that. It's something we don't always get to so easily. Some people, you have them as van drivers if they qualify, right? And there's other tasks that might come. So I've asked all of our department heads to kind of seek out things that might make sense, because it has to be something substantive and useful. And then the other key to this is that if someone is disabled, they can have someone do the work off for them, if approved. So if someone says yes, they do that. So that's in some substance. The town does not currently have a senior tax work-off program. We haven't had one or any clamoring for one. That said, several members of the select board have asked to move this forward. So it's on the warrant. The select board's voted to put it on the warrant. And it's in use in many other communities. Hingham, for example, has a program right next door. And there's communities all over the state. It's been in existence for about a decade. So Cohasset is a little late to the party on this.
Yeah. So, Mary.
Any idea, Chris, on how many residents would be eligible for something like this?
I have not gotten a number from Phil. We have a number of residents who are veterans. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it's not an insubstantial number. That said, I've not seen a community anywhere where the participation is super high, because basically you're working off at minimum wage, right? So it's great if you have time for your retired veteran and you have some needs. But I don't know. We really don't know how high the participation rate will be here. But our Veterans Office at Phil Mahoney has been supportive of this as well. I've asked him to kind of gauge, informally what the interest might be. That said, I think the recommendation that we'll make as a staff to the select board is to cap it at maybe 15 to 20 people max in the first year. Or some communities, most communities cap it somewhere in there, 10, 15. In a given year. And the other key is you have to own the house, right? So a veteran would have to own the house where the credit is being sought for. That's another piece. You have to be a resident. So it can't be your.
I don't know if this has come up in your conversation or not, but if there was a way for them to be able to do any kind of service or work within the schools, that
they
be
could.
a really wonderful relationship that could be built.
So yeah, some communities have done that too. I haven't reached out to the schools yet on that, but we most certainly can. And it would have to be in something, whether they're helping with instruction or something, or I guess some people have, they could do the work. Well, I don't know if they want to work as a bus drivers are unionized now, so probably couldn't get away with that. But I'm sure there's I'd love to work with this. If you want to plug me into someone over there, Mary, that would be great, or let me know that I'm pointing. I guess I assume I would just reach out to Dr. Sullivan, right? That's probably the best answer.
Yeah, I would just think now that I think they are doing civics in 8th grade. I mean, it might, that just might be a really nice little symbiotic relationship that could happen there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You know, they could paint the fence posts and paint the rails alongside the road. There's that paint hydrants, just a lot of things that they could do that would be, you know, it doesn't take a great deal of time and effort, but it needs to be done.
You're muted, Rob.
Patrick, your E-hand is up.
Yeah, Chris, do you have a proposal for who's going to administer this, keep track of it at the town level?
Yeah,
Is that-
the veterans, Phil Mahoney, our veterans officer, I think would probably be responsible for that. And then the departments, for example, he'd oversee the program itself. And the departments where the veterans are assigned would be required to maintain their work records. They have to be quarried just like a regular staff member. This doesn't count as income under state law, so there's no income issues but the department would have to track them and make sure that the work's getting done, that kind of stuff.
Is there any like workers' comp? Does this add to our workers' comp? If someone's injured on the job?
That's a good question. They're not technically employees, they're volunteers. That said, this has been addressed. This is happening in other communities, so I have to check with our insurer to find out that's covered. I mean, we have volunteers now, who do work at the senior center. So I think we're covered in that sense. I mean, I wouldn't put somebody, running a backhoe, right?
And then you also said they had to own the house, but many people put their property into a trust at some point in time. So that would disqualify someone. It has to be in their name. The property has to be in their name.
The law reads that it has to be, as I see it, again, I'm not going to interpret this, and I'm sure I'll have to ask. They have to be the owner of the property. Yeah, that's my understanding. I think Ellen has her hand up, Rob.
You're gonna have someone is gonna have to check the title when someone signs up to make sure that they're the owner of the house.
Yeah. So the application form, again, I've looked at several in other communities, is you have to provide a lot of information like that, right? You have to provide, driver's license, a title record, or so that we can validate that you're a resident, and that that you're a veteran. So you got to provide your veterans, information, and then you'd have to get there have to be information on the property. So.
All right, so I guess it's not really simple, but
no, but it is. But again, we don't have to reinvent the wheels. But it's as an example, it's being done in Hingham right now. So it's not, and it's also being done in Braintree, where our former veterans officer works. And I talked to him about this the other day. So I think the administration is. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on that, Patrick. I don't have all the details of that, but I it's fairly. If this gets approved, we'll have a formal program in place, hopefully for the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Ellen?
So I think you just answered my question. If it gets approved, the program would be for FY25?
24.
Oh, for 24. Okay. Do you have an allocation in the budget just in case?
Well, we have a tax overlay account that covers, reductions in taxes. I think that could be used for this. So again, we have to make sure there's money. Yeah, it's a good point. We have to make sure there's money to cover the credit. That I believe I have to double check it, but I believe we can use the overlay account that's used for reductions in taxes when people appeal their
Okay,
taxes.
thank you.
So that's another reason to
Gene?
track it, by the way. I don't expect 100 people to apply, but it's one thing to find $15,000, something else to find $150,000 in a budget. So,
Gene?
So the way I'm understanding it is this is just a conversation. It's not a vote. It's,
no, so it's on the warrant. So the ask is to have town meeting approve, have the town adopt.
participation in,
And by adopting the state law, the town can then create a program. And the select board intends to create a program if town meeting approves the act or adopts.
okay, because the way that it's presented in the draft warrant, there's no verbiage other than the
Yeah,
announcement of the act itself. So
Yeah.
that I'm just,
I think we have a slightly updated warrant that even more than Rob.
because Rob sent one today.
Yeah,
tonight.
his
That
is-
was the one I got this morning.
Here's a little
It's an
here.
evolving document.
Give me a second.
Okay,
I can show you what it looks like.
Okay, I'd like to kind of see more about what we're approving before.
No, I totally
we
understand.
vote.
So this is what it looks like now.
The minute by minute update.
Yes, we're at that stage. So it says to see if the town will accept MGL 59, it's actually 59.5N, establishing a tax workout program for veterans or take any other action related there too.
Okay,
And again, the summary is I described it, right? It will allow a tax workout program which will eventually reduce their property taxes by performing volunteer services. Current maximum workout is $1,500 with each approved hour equaling $15 in tax. And again, if by the time of town meeting, we actually have a program that the select board is comfortable with, then we'll have something, we're gonna need something ready to go anyway for July. So I think we'll have something together. Once town meeting's done, we'll, I've already asked departments to come up with some jobs, some work. So is that helpful, Gene? This is not.
Yes, yes, I think you can understand my confusion because
Oh,
the
yes.
latest copy that we have, that we just got tonight, didn't have this verbiage in it. And it was kind of confusing to me because it just says discussion of.
Right, no. So this is the latest, hottest version of the warrant.
Okay,
Can you just leave that up for a second, Chris?
Yep. And it's actually to see if the town will accept MGL 59.5N is actually what the technical subsection is.
59 section 5N.
Correct.
That's N as in Nancy.
And as a Nancy. Or N as in Navy, if we want to talk about veterans.
Okay, any other questions before we talk about having a motion?
No.
Hearing none, I think a motion would go like this, to see if the advisory committee recommends the town meeting accept MGL chapter 59, section 5N, establishing a tax work-off program or take any other action related thereto. Strike that, work-off program for veterans or take any other action related thereto.
So moved.
Fran, a second?
second,
Gene, discussion. Hearing none.
And this has been done all over the country and all over the state here. I think it's a great idea.
But yeah, I mean, given if somebody owns a residential property in Cohasset, the tax bill's burdensome. If, it gives a little bit of relief, it doesn't really give that much. So, yeah, it is in the, to me, it's the least we can do department, and I think we should, and I think we will, depending on how this vote goes. Jane?
knowing that there could be 3 or 4 more iterations before next week's meeting. But can we get this emailed to us so that we can have the most recent
Please.
information in the warrant, draft warrant?
I
Yes, please.
I'll send it to Rob and Mary right now and they can forward it to everybody.
Thank you.
Because we actually have, so I'll talk about the next when you're ready. Go ahead.
So we've got a vote in a second before it goes stale. Vote by roll call. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay. You seem to have lost Mike.
Oh, we keep,
Oh,
he was just here a second ago. We lost him again.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep going, and if he gets back in time, we'll let him vote. Frank Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman. I am an aye. And, well, Mike's vote would not be outcome determinative.
He's there. He's there. Hold on.
Oh, good. Okay, we'll hold.
And I'm an
Tied
aye
vote,
on that.
Mike.
I know, I apologize.
It's all tied up. It's all in your hands. No,
Tough cell,
okay,
tough cell
um,
reception in New York.
yeah. Okay, we have a unanimous vote. So I think that covers the substantive matters that we included in the agenda. We do have some minutes that were circulated prior to the last meeting.
Mhm.
I would be happy to review them now. Although, I'm not seeing them in the file that I thought I put them in. Ellen, what was the date on those?
Wednesday, February 15th.
I thought
want a
they were
motion?
circulated.
February 25, they were circulated.
Okay, yeah, if somebody wants to make a motion, that would be great.
I'll make a motion to approve the Cohasset Advisory Committee meeting minutes of Wednesday, February 15th, 2023.
Okay, do we have a second? Then we can have discussion. Mary's a second. Questions, comments? Hearing none. Anything? Nope.
No.
Then a vote. By roll call, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Right,
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman, I am an aye. Thank you again, Ellen. So that brings us to scheduling and topics on upcoming meetings. We had an unscheduled night off last Wednesday. A lot of people ran into things that were either known or emergent at the last minute, and three of us, it was like the professor didn't show up for class, so we all got the evening off, which is kind of cool. I didn't mind. But we did have three departmental budgets that we were going to talk about that night, being DPW, IT, and I think we're going to talk about shared budgets as well. I think it would make sense to try to get to those at our next meeting. Chris, can you give us some previews on other things that are coming our way that we should be prepared for?
So I sat down with Tracy and Michelle and I sketched out the dance over the next 3 weeks. I filled out my bracket. So my town warrant bracket. So the way it shapes up is that you're hearing, so you got through what you got tonight. I think is there one more zoning article that might come back before you, or did you vote on all of them?
We voted on all of them. And if there's
Okay, all
a
right.
substantial change to anything, we can reconsider it. But I think, we kind of went with Tom's predictions on things not being substantially disrupted. And I had talked to him. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. So let's call zoning complete.
So tomorrow night, the select board meet, they're gonna hear the water and sewer budgets. They're gonna look at the stormwater bylaw changes. And they're gonna talk about the big capital projects and decide how to proceed. And that's how to package them for town meeting. That's town hall, fields and courts, schools, and parks, and sidewalks and roads. So for next week, for you, and capital is also teed up. So they're pretty much done. So they're teed up for they're gonna meet at 5 o'clock next Wednesday. So Brian Host is committed to come to you folks after that to present capital. So next week, I think you could do all of your final budget stuff. The other financial articles, which I'm gonna wrap up with Jennifer this week. You can hear the water and sewer budgets, including that, and capital. So you can do like all finance next week. If that works. Then that'll allow the select board next week to pick up zone. They'll do all the zoning. They'll get the VOTEC done, the Valor Act done. And then they'll, after you next week do all of those things, they'll be able to vote all the budgets and financial articles on the 28th. On the 29th, you'll finish whatever's left, which will probably be CPC and a couple of other things that are kicking around out there. It's possible, for example, that the cell tower conversation we've been having, that may get kicked to fall. It depends on where the RFP is on that, because the point of the article would be to approve a lease. But if we don't have an RFP ready to go, then it's not going to matter. And if there's any other, and CPC's scheduled to meet this coming Monday, but whether they finish their decisions, I don't know. Their drop dead will be the 27th. I think if everything moves along, you should be able to wrap things up on the 29th. 2 meetings. Over the next 2 meetings, you should be able to wrap everything up, I think.
We haven't heard from DPW yet.
No, that's next week. You'll hear-
That's part of the group for next week.
Okay, oh, good, right.
That's a lot for next week. That's
Yeah,
a ton.
you'll have a lot of stuff for next week. That said, I'm gonna be getting you those 1-page sheets shortly on those budgets, and all your liaisons should just polish up their work on, so they can help smooth the conversations.
Yeah. I thought we were very prepared for tonight, and we had a lot of material to give to people, so if we can try to replicate that the next 2 weeks, we'll have done our job well. Right, there we go. I see Mary's hand, I see Ellen's hand.
Chris, did you say that the select board is meeting tomorrow night?
Yeah, they had to move Tuesday's meeting for scheduling purposes, so they're actually meeting tomorrow.
Okay, and so fairly important meeting if they're discussing all of those rather large capital items.
Yes,
Are they meeting in person or?
they're meeting in person. It's a hybrid meeting. So if anybody wants to physically be there, it's in the auditorium at Town Hall. If anybody wants to watch on Zoom, it's on Zoom or 143.
Thank you.
Except that when the select board meets in town hall, it's nearly impossible to hear or follow.
So we got a new owl as part of the allocation from the special town meeting, which is a new microphone system. So we're gonna unveil the new owl tomorrow night as well, and it has a new microphone system. So hopefully that will improve sound quality. And actually, that's a much better room anyway. Believe it or not, the acoustics in that room are vastly better if you're physically in the room than at the senior center. It sounds better.
Ellen,
Two questions or comments. If next week's gonna be jam-packed, whatever materials we could get, like by Friday or Saturday morning would be great, because I'm personally finding it challenging, to get through when we have so much material. We get it on a Monday or Tuesday, or even on a Wednesday for a Wednesday night meeting. So that's just a personal request. I don't know how anybody else feels. And two, if next week is so heavy, would we be open to maybe starting earlier? Maybe at 6. Chris, you said capital budgets is at 5. Maybe knock off a department until they finish. I don't know, just a suggestion.
I can probably do that. I don't have a particular problem with other people might have work constraints. I don't know. What do people think? We could 6:30, get a little bit of a jump.
6 would be tough. 7 is
6 would be
better.
tough.
6:30 is a
Maybe
good.
6:30.
6:30, I hear Patrick saying it's okay. Mark, where are you at 6:30, on with 6:30?
I could probably make 6:30 work. 6 would be real tough. 7 is better, but 6:30 I could probably work.
Oh, 6:30 if we have and get in when you can.
Yeah. No, that's
Ellen,
that's
does
fine.
that work better for you?
Oh,
6:30,
it's
that
fine.
seems to be.
Seven's good for me too. I just thought, you tend to be fresher if you start earlier than going late. So 7 is
I also.
fine.
Well, let's stick with, maybe we stick with 7,
Okay.
but if we kind of move at the pace we move tonight, we can get through it. We can and will get through it all, so.
Okay.
All right, so Mary and I will put together an agenda with Chris. I'm with you about, I know at this point, the warrant's beginning to populate itself, so I see that the current versions come around. So if we can get, whatever version of it exists Friday afternoon or Monday morning, and certainly supplemental materials, particularly with the departments that were lined up to see us last week. We should be able to get them before the weekend, so we all, stay out of trouble and spend our weekend reading.
So
budget
we
document.
sent out all the materials last week for those, so theoretically, everybody should have those. I'll have some extra materials. When I said that, the summary sheets.
Yep.
That which you could just jump right to. And the other thing I won't do that for, I have it for IT, but Brian in his PowerPoint, which I think you all have. I think he incorporated that into his PowerPoint, so I'm not gonna recreate the sheets because his PowerPoint basically does that for me. So I will make sure you all have his up. If you don't have the PowerPoint, I'll make sure you all get that as well. And Brian's PowerPoint basically incorporates those one-page sheets in his PowerPoint. Which gives the budget comparison from last year, this year, and all of that. He took that material from mine and put it into his PowerPoint, so.
Yeah, we have those, I guess, just any new like water sewer budget.
Yeah, so select board's gonna be hearing those tomorrow night, so I should be able to get those to you tomorrow or Friday. And then capital, I think Michelle should have like what they're close to. I mean, obviously, they're gonna vote that next Wednesday, so we could give you what's there and what we expect will be moved, so you'll have those.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so.
Gene,
Gene,
One quick question. What time is the select board meeting tomorrow night?
7.
At 7, okay. And I would also appreciate getting your one-page budget summary. That would be great.
I'm being told it's 6:30.
I'm sorry, no, I'm incorrect, sorry. It's 6:30.
Okay, 6:30.
I would encourage us all, if we can, to go or at least pay attention to that. A lot of money they're talking about.
Yeah.
The first hour is gonna be the conversation about the projects, that's the plan.
Okay.
I could go longer than that, that's how it's set up, so. And Gene will be chairing that meeting because Jack's coming remote, so.
Right.
Okay. All right, that's our schedule. I don't see anything I didn't anticipate in the last 48 hours. There's nothing there, so motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Mark,
Second,
second. Gene. Roll call vote. Gene Estino,
aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Hi.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman is an aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. We'll have materials and we'll see you all a week from